And we are live. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever it is you are in the world, and welcome to another edition of Kyoto by Night. This is a scene for the Kindred of the East venue. We start our scene with yet another new KbN making his way to the Myomanji Temple, going to see the ancestor or Sosen Suzume Kisaragi, one of the Thousand Whispers Dharma, who has been here perhaps a bit far too long for her Dharma's tastes. The devil tiger in question, Haji Yoshido, has been summoned upon his arrival in the city. He was given instructions to meet in a informal setting, as this was not a night that the Sosen normally holds court. This will actually be a fairly informal meeting. All the same, there's a certain pomp and circumstance about the whole thing. As he arrives, the retainers greet him graciously, clad in what you might expect in a temple's setting. Various nuns and priests, all wearing their immaculate garb. The young nuns wearing the traditional red hamakas, white kimono. Some that are perhaps new or interested stop and gaze at Haji ever so slightly before returning back to their duties. But he is led to a sitting room adjacent to the actual room with the shrine itself. And he is beckoned to sit on a small cushion upon the tatami mats, where a small table is set before him, with a already warm cup of tea set down in preparation.
Yoshido looks to be about a man of at least maybe 37 years old. His haircut definitely seems to be reminiscent of at least somewhat maybe in his slightly younger days of a very sort of punkish sort of style. It seems that he's managed to comb it down a little bit, but there's definitely a shaved part of his head that, due to his current condition, has not been able to grow back out. But at the very least, he tries to manage to make himself look a lot more refined these days. He wears a very long sort of coat, and even under this coat there's its very long sleeves all the way up to the wrists, and long pants all the way down to the foot of his heel. He's dressed very nicely, sort of like in a very sort of almost business suit, almost attire. There's definitely some very sort of heavy cultural accents to it, despite the fact that it definitely seems to be more of an Eastern sort of style of suit, but it still has its unique cultural tastes here in Kyoto. He sits down gently and patient, despite the fact that deep inside he can already feel the roiling of the po deep inside him. It doesn't like the fact that it's ordered to be here. It doesn't like the fact it's been ordered to come here to Kyoto for this temple, but ultimately Haji Yoshido managed to suppress those wild feelings for the moment, and remains in a state of poise and refinement in the setting. He does not drink the tea until his host arrives.
It takes a few moments before anyone does arrive. The footsteps of somebody wearing tabi socks can be heard. And within a few moments, the sliding screen is opened, and a man wearing a sort of teal-colored Haori and a slightly traditional garb comes to open the door, and he crouches by it, bowing deeply. As he crouches, kneels. The young man looks to be early age, perhaps in his late teens or early 20s. But there's a certain age to his eyes, as though he's been around. There's a certain esteem that one can almost feel coming off of him. He almost oozes and exudes this sense of honor and tradition. But nonetheless, he is crouched, and within moments, the graceful footsteps of a woman in a very pristine white kimono with hair to match makes her way into the room. She moves with a preternatural grace, the hakama kind of billowing around her feet so that you can almost are unable to see her feet at all. Long billowing sleeves are folded in a manner that is traditional and almost flawless. And she comes before Haji and stops.
Haji bows low, showing the appropriate respect. The signal of the man coming in and bowing deeply was at least the signal that the individual he was waiting for was arriving. And upon her appearance, the sense of despite never having met this individual, the wisdom, or at least her status, seemed to at least be takes him aback for a slight moment before he remembers his manners and bows low before her.
And before we go any further, how am I sounding, guys? Do I have it broken up?
You're good. He was breaking up a little.
Okay, so, alright. So, the woman appears to be very young, at least in appearance, but Haji will likely be able to almost sense the palpable resonance of chi on her. It permeates through her body that gives her almost inhuman qualities to how she moves, how her appearance looks. And as she crouches down onto the cushion, she finally returns his bow slightly and places her hands folded upon her lap. Welcome.
Thank you for receiving me.
You are Yoshido Haji, am I correct?
Hi, that is correct.
I don't know if you have been informed of who I am, but I will introduce myself nonetheless. I am Kisurage Suzume, Sosen of this court, member of the Thousand Whispered Dharma. It is a delight to receive you into the holdings of this court.
I am deeply honored to be in your presence, great Sosen.
Now
Though I am surprised at the urgency of my arrival.
We are gathering younger members. We have seen a rise in comings and goings, and as I am sure you are aware, the court has suffered losses in the past decade.
I'm afraid I've only taken the second breath for 5 years, but I have indeed heard of these losses.
At the hands of the Kumo, we did suffer greatly, but we did come out victorious. And our gracious neighbors to the south have been kind enough and honorable enough to uphold their end of an agreement, an accord, if you will, that has kept us from being wiped out completely. I understand that you are a member of the Devil Tiger Dharma. Is that correct?
Hi, that is correct.
If you would be so kind and indulge me, what do you believe your Dharma's purpose?
Well, there's a small sort of like smile that seems to sort of cross his lips as he closes his eyes and thinks about it. His hand comes up across his left hand specifically comes up and he sort of strokes his chin. It's very clear that there is a missing pinky finger when he strokes his chin. What do I see that this Dharma means to me? I can't really say that I've seen it, so to speak, Great Sozin, as of having experienced it. I do not need to say that. I do not need to say that you understand where we all come from before we take our second breath. But that was a catalyzing moment for me. My life has been a life of atrocities without meaning. Is a good way to put it. And in a brief moment of weakness in my mortal life, I became dissatisfied with it. My purpose wasn't there, and so I tried to leave. And death was what was greeted me. And in that screaming moment of my flesh being flayed from me, my eyes being scoured out with needles, my soul enduring torment, I began to begin the smallest bits of understanding. Of course, the next moment I seemed to remember was glass being shoved under my tongue. What is it to be a devil tiger? I begin to understand that there are terrible things in this world, and that I was, in certain respects, right of me trying to leave what I once was. But not for the reasons. I've been told I am of the east direction, I believe. I'm not so sure about, if you forgive my statement here, but I'm not so much about the astrology symbols, but it makes sense to me. I have far more interest in seeking out these atrocities and making sure they're removed. I myself know such things very well, and who better to remove them? And it's just a full, wide smile on his face, a sort of dark, a sort of malicious sort of glitter in his eyes as he states this.
Kisaragi will chuckle slightly. So you share a direction with me, then. I, too, am a child of the East. In more ways than one, she says with a slight smile.
There's a nice chuckle from that.
So, you were then under an Oya ban in your mortal life.
Hi, that's correct. Until death.
Till death. You know, there is an individual in this city, part of this court, that goes by the name of Fu. She too is of your Dharma, though she does not share your direction. She suffered in a different manner underneath the sway of an Oyuban, though I do believe she was more wholeheartedly invested let's say, in her life. I would think that you would do well to meet her and perhaps teach her, as you will undoubtedly learn from her as well. I can tell you that there is much sickness in Kyoto to be dealt with. Human inequity here knows no bounds at times, and while this city certainly does appear to be graceful and virtuous, it has an underbelly. It is very much similar to lifting a rock in the forest. What you see underneath can sometimes horrify you.
I'm from that underbelly, great Sosin. I know what lies under the rocks.
Then who better to help eliminate what is underneath? But I do hope that you have some discretion, as I have met many of your brothers and sisters who are impulsive. And impulsive to a fault.
Please do not mistake my calm demeanor at this moment. I am doing my best right now not to give in. There's still much in this path that I must learn, but I understand I was impulsive in my life. That's what led me to the road I was on, and being part of this Dharma has not helped. But I'm beginning to wonder, well, how much of a curse that is rather than a virtue.
I can tell you quite honestly, some of the most respected KbN that I have ever met, those that I hold in the highest of esteem, do not come from the graceful bone flowers as one might expect. Certainly not from rather judicious cousins in the crane,
Well, that was a goof.
but the devil tigers.
Hey, Ash.
It is something truly wondrous when you see a devil tiger who has focused his Poe to the point where he can appear to be as calm and restrained as any crane I have ever seen. And those are the ones that I not only fear, but respect. I hope that you will look at this example and help the other tigers within this community understand.
I had it before I ordered, you know?
A tree does not grow overnight, great Sosin, but hopefully it will grow strong given enough time.
I do believe it will. Now, before I send you out to meet with a few of your fellows this evening, there are a few things that you must know. One, I do hold to a very traditional mindset of comporting oneself with a certain degree of grace and etiquette, at least among our own kind and those honored guests. We also have an understanding and a running mandate with the Hengyokai. I'm not sure if you are familiar with them or not.
There's a shake of his head.
Shapeshifters. Creatures that take on the form of a man, a beast, and then something in between. Creatures of incredible power, and with a built-in source of yang, as I understand it, that makes our Poe look tame at times.
There's almost like a small smile at that one bit, but he manages to suppress it just enough because he understands the great sincerity that she is putting forward towards him and the seriousness of this.
We have an understanding that we will not engage each other in direct combat. We will not actively work against them. And in return, their larger numbers will not force us from our dragon's nest. This particular dragon's nest has been held by my Wu, and then following up this court, since the time of the Bakumatsu, and I hope to keep it that way. And only our polite dealings with the shapeshifters in the south have managed to keep us in our position. You may encounter them in neutral territory, or on the edges of ours. If you should ever spot them in our territory, you are simply to just ask them to leave. And if they persist, remind them of the mandates that their daimyo and myself have agreed to. However, should you be attacked, I would expect you to retaliate with your full potential.
But such rudeness would be... Such rudeness should at least have some measure of recompense, I am sure.
Yes. In the past decade, we've only had 3 incidents. And of those 3 incidents, they were misunderstandings,
Right.
and we have not had any major repercussions since that time. Beyond our friends to our immediate south, they also control territory in the mountains and further east. But it is not them I tell you to worry about. To our direct south, in the southernmost wards, there is another dragon's nest, and it is not controlled by KbN or Beast, but something entirely different. They have done so for many, many years. I would highly recommend that you do not venture south, any further south than the no man's land between our court and the dragon's nest of the Hengyokai. To do so is to take your life in your own hands, and I cannot guarantee your safety there, as I will send you no aid.
There's a deep roiling inside. It has been building inside Haji throughout the entire conversation of the do's and do nots throughout it. And Haji's calm demeanor almost flinches a bit as deep inside his Poe is literally scrambling and screaming. It's like, how dare she? How dare she tell us what to do? We shall show we will show the. But he's pushing it down. He's pushing it down as best as he can, but even then it seems to be creeping almost alongside. His eye is twitching from time to time. But he manages to keep it together.
Kisarage
Understood, great Susan.
pauses as she can see this inner turmoil almost. And she seems to almost change her countenance. There seems to be almost a drop in her demeanor, and she breaks etiquette only for a slight moment as she has a very sly smile come upon her face. And as she's looking directly into Haji's eyes, it's almost like she's looking past him, looking deep within his eyes, as though looking for what's underneath. And as she does this, Haji will begin to notice sort of a change on her face, sort of her facial structure change ever so slightly. And soon an eye begins to open up atop her forehead. The two lids spreading apart in the directions of east and west as she gazes at Haji with a slight smirk.
There's almost a deep gulp at that point. Despite the atrocities of his mortal life and some of the things he suffered at the hands of the Devil Tigers, there's still certain things about living in this second breath that still unnerve him. Things that are beyond just what would be considered natural. And one's having an eye open upon one's forehead is definitely one of those things, not to mention the deepness of that stare. But he can feel the roiling of his po sort of freeze as it realizes it's being looked at, and it begins to shrink back down deep inside, muttering dark mutterings.
And Suzume will simply smile and bow her head slightly. Go to the Grand Prince Hotel in Kyoto, just east of here. You'll find furnishings and find one of your fellows. I'm sure that she's already tormenting a young thrashing dragon she encountered a few evenings ago.
Hi. We'll do as you ask, great Sose.
I expect great things out of you, Haji. I expect great things out of you both. And with that, she stands. Again,
There's
Go ahead.
Haji kind of bows, somewhat embarrassedly at the use of the formality of his first name. But he shows respect, and especially with her second phrase, it is a very interesting thought of the fact that she is not only addressing him, but the thing, well, himself and his self. But he shows his respects to her as she stands.
And she will simply turn and step out without so much as another word. And it might be at that point that Haji might notice that the young man that had opened the door for her, while he may not have seen it, more than likely because he was focusing on Suzume herself, notices that young man had turned and was staring directly at him with a very, very ill look in his eyes. But he makes no further fuss than a slight look, and then stands himself as she passes and disappears into the depths of the shrine, and closes the door behind her, and is soon gone.
There's a small moment of silence. The bubbling within begins to rise back up again. He kind of stares in the direction of where she's gone, but mostly in the direction of where the man who had been giving him that dark look had been before closing the door. He feels the frustrations of the Poe within, and in a brief moment of instinct, smacks the undrunken teacup across from the small table as it goes tumbling across the tatami. It seems to ease slightly. But he gets back up, straightens himself, and heads downwards, hailing a taxi before making his way to the hotel.
Alright, we're going to cut slightly here. And as we do so, we find little Fu sitting across from Katsu, our good thrashing dragon. And Fu is sitting there with a very large smirk on her face after she has called Katsu just on a social call. But for the length of the evening has not let the fact that Katsu was not more or less knocked out cold several nights ago lead conversation for any great span of time. She always seems to go back to it. And now currently she's just sitting there staring at Katsu. What is Katsu doing?
He's been breathing and letting the little girl do her tormenting, serving her sake in the traditional manner for guests, and smiles. So, have you met with the ancestor yet?
She was upon me within the first few nights that I arrived here, as she does with every new arrival. And she makes it very clear her opinion of you within the first moments of meeting her. And Little Fu picks up a small bit of a pastry off of a plate that was set before her a while ago. Now, for me, I honestly think she was trying to put me in my place. I never really tell with her. Very hard to get a read on that woman. And she... It's like trying to run a wave into a wall. Doesn't always end the way you wish it. And she looks back at Katsu. What did you gather from meeting her?
Well, I was actually given a task. He wants me to gather a group of vassals for the court. On the whole, she seemed rather pleased with me, other than the bit of advice she gave me.
Did she make mention of your running into a door the other evening?
Yes, she said I should have hit the door first.
Fu will just smirk as she kind of leans back in a rather uncouth manner. Oh, really? I was honestly somewhat perplexed that you didn't even take the opportunity. That you just let it all happen, and before you knew it, you were lying on your back looking up, looking at me after mixing together a nice bit of yang-laden goodness into your mouth. Which, by the way, I'm not letting you off easy on that one.
I'm sure I'll find you a suitable vessel.
Suitable entertainment would do for me, in all honesty. That can be easier said than done. And as she says that, she kind of turns her gaze away from Hanasaki and sees another individual entering into the bar room of the hotel. Someone who has a who has just had a rather interesting meeting with the Sosin.
Haji is in the bar room at the moment, looking around, taking in the scenery, watching the individuals mingling there. Oh, his eyes are trained. He knows what to look for when it comes to people. He knows what kind of people are just there, enjoying the evening. You can see at least one or two individuals in the corner there. Yes, they're having business. They're having meetings. Long coats, long sleeves. Yes, he knows exactly who they are. But that's not why he's here. Not yet, despite the burning desires within him. That need. The mixture of wanting to fulfill his purpose along his dharma, at least that's that which has been prescribed to him, and something else. Something far more personal. But that'll have to wait. So he takes them in. He looks at them. He memorizes their faces. And before the gaze stays too long, he moves on. He has a reason he's here. And as much as the poet inside him roiled at it initially, it's been rather quiet since his meeting with the Sosen. But it's still there, boiling and roiling, waiting for just the right moment. Eventually he makes his way to where he needs to go.
As he makes his way into the bar, and as he sort of looks through the crowd, I wouldn't even constitute it as a crowd. It doesn't warrant that much. There's only a handful of businessmen that are there, maybe from Shibuya or Shinjuku. He can definitely see the people that are there for other reasons. You can see the young men and women looking for love, perhaps, or maybe something a bit less virtuous. But what he might notice is a young woman sort of leaning out slightly, looking at him. She was clad in sort of a men's schoolyard uniform, in a manner of speaking, the upper coat, the upper shirt of such a uniform, open just below the chest line, sort of a colorful garb underneath, and various baubles and necklaces and bracelets sort of hanging off of her, and she has sort of a dull look in her eyes, as though she is, for lack of a better term, bored.
Takes the moment. He observes her back. The gazes meet. And it's like lightning, that connection. That understanding. Eyes that have seen too much. Yes. But her eyes at least, they might have seen maybe a little more, or something else. It's not hard to say, but it's an understanding that seems to pass just between those eyes. They've both seen things. They've both done things. And that's something that people like them can hide. He flags a bartender down real fast. Orders a batch of sake for that table over there for the three. She seems to have a guest with her. And he makes his way over there, tipping the bartender before heading over.
Fu just sits back as she says nothing to Katsu and just looks at him and smirks. So, Katsu, if I had to ask, just between the two of us, what would you think of the Dharma of the Devil Tigers at the moment? What's your opinion of us?
You mete out justice, which I can applaud, but I think you take a little bit too much joy in inflicting the pain and don't focus on the justice you're delivering.
Really? And you, my good friend, as she looks up to Haji as he comes up to the table at a rather fortuitous time.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about the Devil Tigers?
That in a single moment, in the stillness of a scream on the wind, my eyes were fade open. As he sits down.
And Fu just looks at Katsu with just this very sadistic and sly smirk upon her face as she, again, just kind of puts her arms behind her head, and as the sake comes to the table, she actually will grab one of the bottles rather than sip from the cup and actually place the actually fairly warm bottle to her lips and drink from it directly. And she'll just look at between the two of them to let them talk for a moment.
So, I see you do not have the same, I assume, since she asked me as I got here, he says, and he takes the moment to pour Katsu the cup first, as is only customary, before pouring himself one, seeing that Miss Fu has taken the liberty of drinking for herself.
Actually, at the moment...
I see that you do not share much the same opinion.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this short, but you guys can continue on after Fu has left.
Okay.
Alright, sorry guys. I gotta run.